Welcome back to Car-Pinionated, our weekly show on cars, the car industry, and driving in general. I'm Doug Stewart, digital executive producer for Fox 61 in Hartford. And this is my friend Jeff Buchholz, who is writer and editor at WBBM in Chicago and also a car enthusiast. Jeff, this week we're going to have a guest cast of thousands here, but we're going to start off with you and me. Um, I thought, it'd be fun to talk about our first cars. And so I'm going to open it up to not only our first cars, because I think we both talked about our first cars, but like, what is the first car that we remember? What is that first, vehicle, maybe that, our family owned or something like that? So do you want to take the lead here?
Yeah, boy, that's a great way to set that up. The first car that I remember vividly um, was a car that my mother drove, actually. For context, I grew up in, at least for the first few years of my life, I grew up in Flint, Michigan, which was and still is a GM company town, though, the town's certainly not as big as it used to be. Um, Both of my grandfathers were retired from General Motors division. My dad briefly worked for GM. And so, everybody we knew had GM cars. My mother had as her car when we were kids, my sister and I, a 1967 Opel Cadet B Rally. This was in silver with black
Mhm.
stripes, little fog lights in the front.
The two
It
door? Two,
it was the two door with the little
okay.
with the little strakes kind of on
Yeah.
the C pillar there. A terribly handsome car, which was very, very slow. My recollection is that the engine was like an 1100 cc four-cylinder engine. That is the first car I sort of remember um, as a kid. As I grew up, I was particularly interested in all kinds of crazy cars. We had a My mom had a really good friend who had two daughters that were, one daughter was my age, one was my sister's age, and we all went to school together. And the mom, this is in the 70s in Flint, drove Saabs. She had a 96, and then she had um, two 99s in succession, followed by a 900. She drank the Kool-Aid, man, and I thought Saabs were super cool. Sometime later, when I was like 16, I was um, around my neighborhood, and at this point, we'd moved to northern Michigan, and I was riding around my neighborhood, and I saw somebody had put a Saab, the 96 a 96 wagon
Okay. Yeah.
in their front yard with a for sale sign on it. And this thing was beat to garbage, honestly. But I remember running home and going, "Mom, can I buy this?" And she was like, no. The car I ended up buying was a car that a former classmate of mine sold to me. It was a 1979 Plymouth Horizon. It was green with a green custom tweed cloth interior, and
Ooh, you were
how
fancy.
it was fancy. This was with the 1.7 liter Volkswagen Audi engine and a three-speed manual transact, or no, three-speed automatic transaxle, because Carl, the friend from whom I bought it, didn't know how to drive a stick. I bought that car, and it already had installed in it an upgraded Sony car stereo,
Hmm.
which was great for playing all of my Eurythmics tapes. Um, and it also had about $16 in change in the ashtray, which I discovered after driving it for about a week. I heard this rattling in the
Yeah.
dash. I'm like, what on earth is this? And I opened the ashtray, and coins exploded out at me as if I'd hit a jackpot at Slots of Fun or something. And um, I saw it as kind of being my rebate, I guess. It was the 80s. Every car had rebates, right?
Right. Slap some money
Um,
on the hood.
Yeah, exactly. You know what? It was a really good first car. It wasn't fast enough to get me
Hmm.
in any real trouble. It was it was able to swallow everything I owned when I
Yes.
when I moved to college. I mean, that was
Hmm.
the car that moved me to East Lansing. Um, and it served me it served me for 6 glorious months until I ran it into the back of a pickup truck while I was home on Christmas break, which was a bummer. I was
Yeah.
not hurt. Neither was the gentleman driving the Action Line series Chevy truck I slammed into the back of. But the impact totaled both vehicles.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
there you go. But I always have kind of had a soft spot for the L body, the Omni and the Horizon. I mean, I don't know that they were particularly special cars, although I think they got a lot more special when Chrysler wedged the 2.2 in them.
Hmm.
And the coupes, the little Charger and the Turismo, like those were actually kind of chic
Hmm.
for the time. And the Rampage, which was the same platform, was kind of a fun little car pickup thingy, which could be an inspiration for a future Stellantis Ute to take on the Ford Maverick, maybe. But
Hmm.
I've always kind of had a soft spot for those. Like they weren't, they didn't set anybody on fire particularly, but they were reasonably reliable. They
Hmm.
built them for 13 years, I think. They built them up
Hmm.
till 1990. And they served a lot of people super well, particularly as kind of second and third cars.
Hmm.
Um, and they were, you know what, they were pretty solid. And everybody I know who had one still talks fondly about theirs. Like, oh man, that thing ran forever, or
Yeah.
that thing moved me to blah blah blah. Like those were solid. Those were good.
I had one. It wasn't my first car, but I had an 87 when they first started doing the Omni and Horizon America, where it was like
Oh,
a
right.
package option
Yep.
package. So it had
Yep.
automatic transmission and power steering and power brakes and an air
Yeah.
conditioning and an AM FM cassette.
Right.
I think whatever.
Reduce the variations, lower the price.
Right, right.
All the tooling's paid for. Get them out the door.
Exactly, exactly. It was silver, good, honest car. That's what I've always
Yeah.
described it as. Wasn't,
Yes.
and it had the 2.2,
Hmm.
which I love that engine.
Hmm.
Um, and this would had been my car that I bought when I left the car rental company. But good, honest car, swallowed you're right, swallowed everything you put
Yes.
into it. My first car that I remember was my parents had not one but two DKWs. And if I've
Your
mentioned them
father's
before,
taste in cars is just mind blowing. Like, who buying a car in the United States in the late 50s and early 60s go, hey, you know what? How about this weird German brand?
why not have a two-cycle front-wheel drive car that have doors that open in the front? Or, and that coupe's a little small. Why don't we get a station wagon? You know? Anyway, um, weird, interesting. I have vague memories of the coupe. I clearly remember the station wagon. I remember like when it was in its last legs, he had thought about cutting the back off and making it a trailer, which I'm sure my mother was thrilled about. But yeah. Um, anyway, my first car that I also bought from the car rental company because I was working there at the time, and this is before I had company cars. Uh, from there, I bought a 81 Pontiac Phoenix. So the lovely X
Goodness.
body with a
Oof.
beautiful light blue with a dark blue vinyl interior. Um, I liked it. About a month after I got it, I nearly totaled it. And so, but as time went on, the thing, this is my memory of the X body in general, all those cars, they were like grinding coffee, right? The whole thing just like it was kind of slow and laborious, and you eventually got up to speed, and it just made a lot of noise. It was comfortable. decent. This one was a hatchback, again, utility,
Mhm.
usefulness. Around about that time, I kept saying, because of my job, what I would do is go around to the various locations, and I would go and I wanted to get um, a company car
Mhm.
because I would take a car from the fleet, and anyway, but I ended up getting a Mitsubishi Tretia of all things.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. Wow. So, the X car it's another one of those series of General Motors cars that they brought out too early,
mhm,
spent several years working on it, finally got it to a place where it was a decent car, and then killed it.
mhm.
The X car walked so that the A body could run, I think, in a
Sure,
lot of ways.
absolutely.
And those things lasted forever. No, but no,
Um,
those Phoenixes, if they had sorted that stuff out, like they were actually kind of handsome, particularly later on in the model run.
mhm.
Um, I mean, Americans don't really like hatchbacks very much unless they look like SUVs, um, yeah, there's tons of utility there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and when I got the LeBaron GTS Turbo, one of the best
Mhm.
things about it was that it was a hatchback and it
That's
looked like a
right.
hatchback, you
That's
know?
right. That's exactly true. Yeah.
All right. Well, Glenn has joined us because he couldn't make when we taped the rest of the show. He had stuff,
Yeah.
important stuff. And so Glenn's going to tell us about his first car.
Yes. Which is a little bit of a complex topic for me because I had a series of used cars that were my first cars. None of them were really mine. They were handed down to me. So I never really had that feel of a first car until I bought new. Um, and the real reason I don't want to mention any of my used cars that I had before my first new car was because they were all completely horrible cars. They were just the worst. Um, I had an Audi Fox, 1976. It was built in Belgium, and this car was possessed by the devil. It really was. I think I've mentioned it here many times in the past. The car was possessed. It finally burst into flames, and I swear I saw the face of Satan laughing at me. Eventually, it led up to when I bought my first new car, and that was the first time that I think I consciously went out and purchased a car. And that was my 1986 Volkswagen Golf, two-door, Nimbus blue or Cirrus blue, one of those. It was a cloud
It
formation
was a
blue.
pretty blue. It was a very
Yeah, it
pretty
was. It
blue.
was a metallic blue shade, like light blue, and it was a terrific little car, and it served me really well. I had very few mechanical problems with it. It didn't have power steering, which was kind of fun. On the highway, easy. Parking lots, I mean, I really, I got quite the workout with that. Um, it had five on the floor. It had the E-light, which was a little arrow that would light up on the dash, reminding you to upshift to save gas. Like people need a reminder to upshift their cars. I got used to it. A lot of people were annoyed to death by the E-light. It's one of those things that you've seen it 1,000 times. You start to ignore it. But overall, my VW Golf was just, it will always have a very special place because it was my first new car. And it was the first car that just didn't give me grief.
Okay, and I want you to mention the license plate that you had on your.
Oh, yeah. Um, so my car was Das car. And it could have been Der car too, but Das just worked better. So, um, and that's what I drove around. Oh, and I spelled car Kar on it too.
Yeah,
So it was
yeah,
not everybody got it,
yeah.
which is okay,
It's
but
I've said this before. It's one of the first things I remember about you.
ah,
I remember seeing your car
mhm.
and in the parking lot or wherever we were and thinking, oh, that's cool. I like that. All right. So thank you, Glenn. We
My
have
pleasure.
more to come. We have some from folks from the TV station and a special appearance from my brother and and Gator Bob. Gator
Right.
Bob is joining us.
Yeah.
So.
And I know he's got a great story to tell. I know he does.
All right.
All right, I'm Brent Harden, Fox 61 News anchor, here to talk about my early cars. I don't have a picture of my first car, which was a 77 Mercury Capri, which I pretty quickly started calling my Mercury Crappy because it was just that kind of car. But a couple of cars later, I got a chance to buy a Mercedes-Benz on the gray market. Some of you old timers remember what the gray market was. These were European cars that were originally sold in Europe. They were brought over to the States, and they had to have a lot of revisions made on them. The Department of Transportation required some safety things that Europe didn't require. And they were typically crates that people in Europe knew they could unload on unsuspecting Americans like me. And so I wound up with a 1978 Mercedes-Benz 450 SLC that was a crate, and it was the oddest color. Never seen it on another car. It was kind of in the picture here. It just kind of looks beige, but when you saw it in person, it had some odd shades to it. It actually was the color of human flesh. So it was just a just kind of bizarre thing. Had kind of a lot of trouble with it because there was a lot of corrosion. It was eaten up with rust, and funniest story, one morning my mother had asked me to come by and pick her up and take her to church, so dutifully I was doing that. It was a rainy morning, I'm driving along, and you know, the thing is that your perspective when you're driving a car is you hit a puddle and the water all shoots out away from your car. But what you don't realize really, because you don't see it, is that that's happening with each individual tire, and inside the tires that water is shooting up. Well, this car was kind of rusted out, and I hit a puddle, and that water came shooting up. It went right through the floor on the passenger side and hit me right in the face. And it's muddy water full of gravel and probably pieces of rust from the floor that it picked up. And suddenly I'm like driving along, and it's, you know, water dripping off my nose, and it's running down the inside of my window here. So listen, the way it got fixed, the guy was kind of a genius. He built a metal basket on the outside, and then on the inside of the car he just pulled the carpet up and put a lot of epoxy down and molded it so that it was the same shape, so the carpet would lay back down, and once he did that you couldn't tell that there was anything wrong with it. So the car probably was fine after that, but I'd had enough, so I sold it and went on my merry way. But that was one of my early mistakes in the car biz.
Hi everyone, Erica Arias here. We are talking about our first cars. My first car that was mine was a 1986 Nissan Maxima. I love that little thing. It was a 5-speed, which still to this day, I think everyone should learn how to drive a standard car. It is really fun if you've never experienced it. So that was my first car. Fast forward a few years. My next car, call it my sort of fancy car, I got a Saab 9.3 right before I graduated from college because I was actually working at a financial investment company, and I loved that car. It was right after they kind of went through that redo where they were a little bit curvier, bubblier. It was a 9.3, 2 doors. Loved that car, and it was fantastic. I have to dig up a picture.
I'm Jimmy Altman. I'm on Fox 61, and my first car was the Greylood. Doug, you know?
Yes.
We called it the Greylood. It was a 1985 used Honda Prelude. I believe standard transmission, 4-speed. I learned on a stick. Very few people can do. Can you drive a stick?
I can. I absolutely can.
Not many people can. Ask around. I bet you we're the only ones in the newsroom.
I think Erica Arias.
Erica can, you think?
Yeah.
I bet
She mentioned it when I was, yeah.
Outstanding. We should do a thing just on people who can drive sticks. But yeah, I mean, you know, you were just down low and driving the stick in the 80 inches of snow in Syracuse, New York. I mean, sure, my parents go have at it. You know, the stick shift. 130 horsepower or whatever in Syracuse.
If that.
But you know what? I liked it. It was good times, and I graduated from there, but literally and figuratively. But that was a fine ride. I have no complaints, and it got me through. Right, it got me through the snow. I figured out how to maneuver it in all sorts of conditions. And would I drive it now? Hell no.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt Scott, meteorologist extraordinaire on the Fox 61 Morning News. So my daughter is now driving. I'm okay. But it reminded me of a story. I was teaching her how to drive in the snow. And it reminded me of a story back when I was, just starting out as a young pup in this business. And I was in Washington, D.C., and I had to get to a TV station every morning so I can help out on this talk show. Well, during winter, obviously, D.C., a lot of snow, except, hey, guy grows up in Florida. I have no idea how to drive in the snow. Nobody ever taught me. Nobody ever showed me the ropes. I have no idea to this day how I am still alive talking to you and not like running like bumper cars on the Capitol Beltway. But for some reason, I was able to learn on my own. See? Florida boys, we know what to do.
My parents bought me my first car when I was in college. 1976 Toyota Celica. It was beige with the aftermarket AC in the front because I live in Florida. I loved it. So when I went to get my first real car in life, I wanted to get a Toyota. I ordered a Toyota Corolla, but the point was I wanted the color key bumpers. Back then you'd get the black bumpers or the chrome bumpers. I didn't want that. So I gave them a deposit, waited till the car to come in. They called me, I went in, I see it, it's got black bumpers. So I say to the dealer, what's going on? Oh, we can paint those. I said, forget it. My brother goes, there's this new dealership place down the road called Acura. I said, what the hell's an Acura? Never heard of it, it was brand new. We drive down to the Acura dealership, 13,000 beautiful brand new red Acura with the pop-up headlights in the front. It's the best car I've ever had, and I went on to buy several more Acuras after that.
Hi everyone, I'm Keith McGilvery, morning anchor here at Fox 61, and boy oh boy, my first car was a 1999 black Toyota Avalon. I bought off my parents, I think for about $800, and I drove it until it died. I was so proud of it. I was so disheartened to give it up, but those first cars, you drive them till they die.
Hi, I'm Sarah Sanchez from Fox 61, and my first car I got when I was 16 years old, the summer of 2002 maybe, I don't know, and it was a 2001 Volkswagen Beetle. It was the new Beetle, obviously, and it was yellow. It was, I think it's called sunflower yellow. There's different yellows in the Volkswagen family. It was my dream car. I always wanted a yellow Beetle. I actually wanted a yellow Beetle when I was a child, when they just had the old ones, and I knew that I just wanted one. And so when they had the new ones, I knew I wanted that, and it was so special because they had the little flower cup holder and it had the sunroof, and I drove that thing for another 15 years, I think, when it became a money pit, and I was putting way more money into it than it was worth. My poor husband was like drawing money from his savings account at that point because I was married and it was his problem now. So I got rid of it in Montana, when I was living in Montana, and I was bawling hysterically at the car dealership when I left it. It was really bad. I was crying, but I was getting a new car, and they were like, aren't you excited about your new car? And I didn't even care. I was just so sad to leave my Beetle. So when I left it at the dealership and I was crying, the guy who sold us the car then watched the morning show that I was on the next day, and I was crying again because I was leaving Montana and I was crying to leave the station and saying goodbye to everyone on air. And he said, she was in my dealership yesterday. She was also crying. He's like, she's just been crying for days. But I miss it. I do. But it was just really, at the end, was not a good car to hold on to.
So welcome, Dave. So we're talking about our first cars, and I know your story about your first car, but why don't you go ahead and tell your story?
Well, it started when my mom said, maybe you shouldn't be having full access to the family car anymore. And I went to Hoffman Ford to look at a Chevy Monza that they had there. They also had a Saab 99, which was brown. I remember it was brown, and I've since heard the color of that tone called like prosthetic brown or hearing aid brown, or and that was a completely different driving experience. A very, very upright seating, and I talked myself into it. Oh yeah, this is going to be. I'm going to be. Well, it's a little bit weird, but it's sophisticated, and it's not a bad price. And uh, I signed a deal for it. And when I was walking around with, I was like, oh, responsible, looking at everything, and oh well, this turn signal doesn't work, but that seems like an easy fix, probably just a light bulb. And that's what the salesman said. Yeah, probably just a light bulb. We'll replace that light bulb and we'll get it right back to you. And they had it. Um, I called them back a couple days later. I'm like, what's the deal with this light bulb? And they said, uh, well, we did look into the light bulb, but it turns out that there's some corrosion behind the bulb electronics, and we are gonna, we're gonna investigate that further. We'll get back to you. And uh, I gave them a couple more days, and there was more. They were talking about more problems, and eventually, I think that they put the car up on a lift, and they decided that enough of the rear suspension was worn out or rusted out or something was gone, that they were not going to be able to even profitably repair it. So they canceled the deal on me. So then I had to start all over again, and that was kind of annoying. And I think that I'm not sure how I became aware, but there was another dealership in.
Okay, so here's what I remember is that your salesman quit that dealership and went to a different dealership and then called you.
Oh, maybe.
And said, I have this car.
And it was
now this is the Nova.
Yeah, 78 okay. Chevy Nova. So it was obviously a completely different direction because it was much more ordinary car. With the mid-size V8, the 305 V8, and automatic transmission, which none of those things did I really want. but it was at least, it may have been like a few $100s less. I remember paying $3,500 for it, and it had 78,000 miles on it, and it was I was like, well, this will probably be okay for a little while.
Well, it's been fun talking to everyone about their first automotive experiences, whether it's the car that they liked or the car that they owned. And we're going to put a wrap on this one for this week. Thank you, Jeff, for your memory dump.
Memory dump, trauma dump. Really, it's all the same.
Whatever, it's close. So you can watch more Car-Pinionated episodes on our YouTube channel. And we will see you next time.